Welcome everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for this month's community conversation. This month we're going to ask the question, what's my role? What should I be doing? And explore some answers to this question. We're going to hear from one another about how our current situation here in my adopted hometown of Washington, D.C. Is looking from wherever you are, your town, anywhere in the USA or in North America, Mexico, Canada, how things are looking in Europe. There is a global effect to the changes that have happened in the political world of the United States. So hearing how you're responding to this and brainstorming a bit about what's possible, what are sources of inspiration, what's a good way to look for the answer to this question of what is my role. We'll also talk a little bit about self-care and how to counteract the flood the zone tactic that's meant to induce fear, apathy, hopelessness, and ultimately inaction. And I'll do my best to share some thoughts about what the yoga wisdom tradition has to say about all this. So to begin, I just want to check in. How are you feeling? Please feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand and share, if you like, how you're feeling right now. You're feeling stunned, apparently. All right,
Overwhelmed.
Well, overwhelmed. All right, Michelle, thank you. I think you're probably in good company, given that the situation can very easily feel overwhelming, and I think it's designed to be overwhelming. So no big surprise if it's having the intended effect. Anyone else care to share how they're feeling in the present moment?
I alternate between despair and rage.
Also, I think you are in good company in that regard. Lena, thank you. Diane?
Just kind of trying to observe all this and trying to take a step back and not get swept up so much. And initially I was just in a whirlwind, and I kind of stepped back a little bit, and I'm kind of assessing. There's a lot of talk, a lot of air flowing around, but I don't know where it's all going. And I don't think I need to be in the center of all the crazy. And I found that that calms me a lot. And I happened to watch the news yesterday, and I saw Elon Musk's child picking his nose in apparently it's supposed to be a fairly important meeting. And it actually caused me to laugh. And I thought, you know, I need to look at this little kid and not so much about the noise that's going on, because it's just a lot of noise to rile us all up. And if we're not riled up by what's being said, the press is riling us up. I think we just need to take a step back and actually read what's being said. And you can say no. No. And yeah, I'm starting to dig my heels in and say, no. That's where I'm at.
All right, Diane, thank you. You brought up something important that I was listening to someone else speak about just the other day. If we're feeling overwhelmed, we're feeling angry, we're feeling despair, but what we don't feel is any clarity about what to do about any of this. One reason for that is because none of the content that we've been consuming, none of the media content that's been thrown our way has been meant to inform us about what to do. It's meant to rile us up. And so it's not helpful. So on the one hand, staying in touch with the media enough to know what's going on, but not so much as to be overwhelmed by it, looking through the chaos rather than at the chaos is one way in which to stay engaged without being propelled into reactive mode. You know, what we want to do is respond as opposed to react, and there's a subtle difference between those two things. So thank you very much for sharing that. Anyone else want to just share how they're feeling, where they're at right this moment? Sharon, go ahead.
So I share a lot of what's been said. And to add to that, I would say there are times that I just kind of disengage from it as a way of shielding myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel guilty that I'm disengaging. And, you know, I want to stay connected. Another thing that I find is that if I back away from the major news, from some announcement that's been made, and wait a day or two, that announcement has changed into something else. So it's good to not react right away.
Mm-hmm.
Wait and see. Something that I read somewhere that was suggested was pick one or two areas that speak to you and focus on those in terms of doing, rather than trying to run around and do a little bit here and a little bit there.
We're going to talk more about that later. I have that as a specific thing to bring up in the category of finding our role, knowing what to do. But here's another important point that I think you brought up. You know, for the sake of self-care and self-preservation, we think, I need to stop watching this. And sure enough, if you wait 24 hours, you'll get a whole new pile of stuff to look at. And one of the things that a yoga practice and a yogic understanding can help us with is to be engaged from a position of compassionate detachment. So even when we are looking at the news, we can do so from a position where we are not as affected by it. In other words, we can engage from a position of equanimity in order not to be thrown around by the chaos that we see coming at us through the media. So I'm going to try and circle back to that before we're done today too. Thank you so much, Sharon. Keshi Hunter Prabhu, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I feel disappointed in our country men and women, that somehow or other, even after the first time around, that they've made this choice. I'm thankful that my mom, who passed away in 2016, didn't have to see either of these two elections. You know, she grew up in the Depression, and my father was in World War II, and it just seems just such a historically strange time to be in. I mean, the way I deal with it is I don't watch so much directly the news, but there's some very funny comedians and commentators that they're actually very politically aware, but they make light of these things. And that helps a little bit, because the things are just so absurd that you have to laugh at them on one hand. But I do feel that compassion toward, I think, a lot of people that are going to be affected by these things, and I feel a little bit helpless, like what can I do? I'm not so much worried for myself, but there's, you know, I don't have any children, but I feel for my friends who have kids and grandkids. I just don't know what, you know, how they're trying to explain things to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you and I feel similarly in a couple of respects. I also have my list of people who I wish were here still, but then again, they would be so displeased that I'm in a way grateful that they are not having to deal with this. The other thing that I thought of while you were speaking is something that I think will be useful for all of us to process or contextualize what we're experiencing, and that is what appears to us to be chaos is actually looking good and normal to the audience it's intended for. That a lot of what's happening now is content creation for a particular audience who is not us. To us, it looks like mayhem. To the audience the content is intended for, it looks like this is exactly what's supposed to happen, and it's a big improvement from what we had before. So for me, I find it helpful from the standpoint of keeping my equanimity, that I understand that what's happening through the media is content creation for an audience who is not me. And that, I think, mentally and emotionally frees me up to be more proactive and equipoised about how I respond to it. So, Keishi Hunter, thank you very much for sharing this. Michelle, go ahead.
I was just thinking when I believe it was Sharon was speaking about the news and folks removing themselves from the news. And, to your point with regard to content creation, a lot of folks that stand to benefit from the downfall of our country are the folks that are controlling that said media. I've removed myself from social media, and quite honestly, I feel like it's been helping to get my news from other sources. But I just think it's interesting, like what people must be thinking, is I think in a lot of regards they're not. And I think that they're just following the art, the content that's been created and designed to make them think a specific way about what is actually happening versus what we see. So,
I have a follow-up question for you, because one of the things that I've been thinking about in terms of, well, what is my role? Or what is my role not? My role is not to try to engage with people who are either pretending to be asleep, that is to say, people who are aware that what they're hearing is disinformation in the echo chamber of right-wing media, but who are determined for irrational reasons, let's say, emotional reasons, to cling to it. So it's not my role to try to wake people up who are totally invested in the current paradigm until it doesn't work for them anymore. And my role is part of my role is to pay attention to creators who are telling us how we can make a difference. So I'm wondering, who are you listening to? Like, who are your alternative sources?
Legia Miller on YouTube is a Minnesota-based attorney who has been providing updates and legal news for a couple of years now. So I find that if I'm going to get just one little bit a day, I will tune into what she's saying more or less is happening, because I understand that she knows a bit more as a lawyer about what's happening. Legal Eagle is another YouTube channel that I watch. He's a little less biased than Legia. I know Legia is very liberal. I think that the information that she provides is still beneficial and still helpful to know. I like the way that she puts things. Brian Tyler Cohen is a bit more of a sensationalist, but he typically has a good finger on the pulse, in my opinion, of what's happening. So I know these folks are a little bit more connected within their local communities, and they understand where to find the information. But I'm also checking in on my local websites to see what the local folks are doing. I was involved in political activism back in 2016, 2017, 2018. So I'm also getting information from the organizations that I've subscribed to as well, Indivisible, Voters Not Politicians. So again, outside of the scrolling and like those little bits of sensational topics that are like set to kind of explode your brain. I just find, tuning in, once a day to one of these channels and or just kind of checking in with folks that I know already as well. BBC News, a news outside of the US, I think has some information as well. So yeah, just as long as it's not Facebook, Instagram, Reddit's really bad. Yeah.
There are some people you can find on Instagram that I found to be helpful. One recently is someone, Jess Craven, who's very good at giving advice on how to write your representatives in Congress, for those of you who are lucky enough to have representatives in Congress. Also in the chat, and please, all of you, if you like, follow Erica's good example. Jamie has also chimed in here. Robert Hubble, Joyce Vance, and Heather Cox Richardson, who I also follow. They're all on Substack. The Guardian is doing a pretty good job. Indivisible is a good place for weekly email updates. The ACLU, and folks are gravitating to Blue Sky as an alternative to Meta or X, what have you. David Packman from Keishi Hunter, a progressive commentator on YouTube. So thank you very much. All right. Cody, go ahead.
Yeah, so I really enjoy listening to On Point by NPR, but there is a specific segment that comes on Fridays, and there is a commentator by the name of Jack Beatty who has given me so much information and insight. He likes to use historical references when he talks about modern day things. Jack is amazing, and he's super jovial, and he knows how to make politics and also history like super it's not heavy. um he's really good. And you guys mentioned public broadcasting. I'm into DW, which is German public broadcasting. They're really cool, and I just wanted to kind of mention those things.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely, no worries.
A last source that I'll mention is On the Media. This is going to be found on your local NPR station. That's a program out of WNYC in New York. It's covering the media as a journalist, and so also a good resource. And I'm going to also agree with Keishi Hunter about comedians. It is good therapy to hear really smart people make fun of this stuff. And there are truths to be found in comedy. That's why court jesters have always been with us. So if you are inclined towards stand-up, that is also a good source. Now, you also, Michelle, you also spoke about local sources. And that's something I've been hearing a lot about the importance of building community in the most local, at the most local level possible, and then networking out from there. And one way to do that is to identify impact. That is to say, how are you being directly affected by what's going on? Are you? Are you being indirectly affected by the changes that are currently happening? Who closest to you is being directly affected? And then looking for ways to connect with people to solve whatever problems the situation is creating for you, or helping others solve problems that are being created for them. From Jamie, Democracy Docket is a newsletter written by Mark Elias, who is the lawyer behind a lot of the huge lawsuits against Trump. That's at democracydocket.com. So for anyone who's looking for that. Now, one of the other things that I have been hearing, or I should say being reminded of, which I think is important, especially for all of us who are feeling overwhelmed. It's just all so big. It's just all happening so fast. It's like, how many fingers can you put in the dike when there's like holes being punched in that dike's every minute, and usually higher than we can reach or farther off to the side than we can reach. So here's an important point that I've been hearing. No one has to do everything. None of us has to do everything that needs to be done, but everyone has to do something. And even if it's a little thing to slow down the process of what's happening, every little grain of sand that you throw into a machine helps to slow the machine down. Even if we feel like we're doing something that's just so small, so insignificant, compared to the problem that we see or the problems that we see, if everyone is doing something, some small local thing, then that all adds up to many, many, many grains of sand that can gum up the works of a machine that we want to stop. So we can start. One thing that I've been hearing is how we start just on a personal level, taking action that aligns with our values, aligns with our beliefs, aligns with the goals that we want to achieve, which means that we have to have some kind of positive vision for what we would prefer to be working towards, rather than just a negative vision, a vision of what we don't want. If we get absorbed in pushing back against a negative vision all the time, that can be pretty depleting. Whereas if, on the other hand, we can visualize what's the alternative, what do we actually want, and then figure out how to take incremental steps in that direction, then that is a much more motivating and sustainable approach to finding our role than just trying to stop a negative. So that's a personal level action that we can take. There are other things that we can do, such as non-cooperation, identifying where we spend our money, because it's all about money, and then making sure that we don't spend it in those places that are part of the problem or caving to the problem, and that we are spending it with people who are determined to maintain an alignment with our values. So that's, where, if you want to stop something, take the profit out of it. This is how America works. If you don't like something, make sure nobody can make any money doing that thing, and then it'll go away. Yeah, I'm getting a little positive reinforcement from Jamie. Hey, Jamie, feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand if you have hands free. I know sometimes you're cooking while you're listening, but feel free to jump in if you like. There are other things that we can do if we're wondering what can I do? Well, that's where Google can help. You can look for information about, is there a group in your neighborhood that is dedicated to protecting immigrants? Or are there women-owned businesses that you want to support, or African-American-owned businesses in your neighborhood that you want to support, or even online? They can also be sources of, Google can be just a good source of information for where you can find allies to get together with, or who you can be supporting in a positive way. Erica, what is 5calls.org?
Hi, yeah, 5calls.org is an app you can download. I think there's also a website, and it makes it super easy to make a phone call and leave a message, including with a script to your Congress people for your state.
Mm-hmm.
I do 1 call a day, even though they have like 50 calls listed. If I can do just one, I am making a difference. And they say that the calls are actually more impactful than the emails to our representatives and our senators. And I mean, we really need our Congress to start making a change. Even if you have Republican, wherever you are, Republican representatives. Yeah, Congress needs to start pulling some weight here, right? That's they're supposed to be speaking for on our behalf. So they're saying it is making a difference. If they know that we're behind them, their voters are behind them, they'll start taking a little more risk. So that's what I'm doing.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yes, I'm inclined to agree. Somebody needs to start writing a document called Project 2029 and right now, and then making plans to implement it once we get there. And something to consider if you live in a red state, red states tend to be the states that get the most money from the federal government. And when that money stops coming, there may be some buyer's remorse. So getting ahead of that anticipated buyer's remorse by telling even a congressperson or a senator who, at least for the moment, is kissing the ring, how you're not pleased with what's going on in the direction things are going, that's going to add up. Now, what I have heard, and those of you who are more engaged in direct political action can tell me what you think of this, is that if you're calling someone from out of state, your messages will not be taken nearly as seriously as those coming from actual constituents. So that's what I know, or at least that's what I've heard. So somebody can.
That is correct. I have no voice. Sorry, I'm typing because I have no voice, but that's correct.
Okay, Jamie, thank you. Jamie has no voice because she is the loudest cheerleader for all of us who are in the process of pushing back and trying to create a new vision. Michelle, go ahead.
What Jamie had mentioned in the chat reminded me of something that I had read. And I know that a lot of folks within the spiritual community maybe know and understand about one's energetic field. But what you're focusing on and the level of vibration, higher levels of vibration can manifest themselves way farther out and have a tendency to impact more people. And if you have a group of, say, like 12 people, for example, all praying together at the same time, focusing that intentional energy on, say, the vision and changes that want to be made, like that's something that could potentially be done. That's maybe something we could even all do together, maybe if you want, you know.
Thank you. Yeah, and I wholeheartedly encourage precisely that kind of togetherness. All right, thank you. Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah, I just put something in the chat that speaks to my view of a lot of this. I recently met a woman who is a yoga teacher, and I think she referred me to your website. I think that's how I made contact with it.
Ah,
So I assumed that her perspective was similar to mine. And as we got to know each other, she said to me, "It sounds like you listen to different news than I do." And I said, "Yeah, that's probably so, because I'm kind of scared by what's going on right now." And she said, "Well, it's all about perspective. It's all a matter of perspective."
hmm.
And that has really stayed with me, to remember that it's a matter of perspective. And I like her. She's not evil. She's well-meaning. She's a really good yoga teacher,
Mm-hmm.
but she has a different perspective than I do. So I see my desire right now is to, I think all of what you're saying is really good, to take political action. But for me, it's about connecting on a personal level and trying to slow down the polarization that I see is upon us, and that what's going on in this country is just part of that.
All right, thank you. I am going to play a little devil's advocate with the idea of accepting that other people have different perspectives based on where they're getting their information. For myself, I have been in dialogue with someone who I've had a relationship with for a very long time, who has been, frankly, instrumental in my personal spiritual life, and who I have a great deal of respect for from a spiritual standpoint, who can't, from a material standpoint, seem to be able to distinguish between purposeful disinformation that is the standard operating procedure for right-wing echo chambers and objective factuality, something that actually has evidence to support it. And it has made the dialogue extremely difficult, because when I'm in dialogue with this person, he asks me to give equal weight to disinformation and objective facts. So alternative facts, another way to speak about perspective. And so while on the one hand, yes, we certainly want more unity, we want more mutual understanding. On the other hand, without being judgmental, I think it's important for us to be able to use good judgment with regard to how mutually exclusive worldviews can or cannot be reconciled. And what are the prospects for finding common ground with people who have a completely different sense of reality? In other words, if there isn't a shared foundation of reality to work from, then how useful is that conversation? So that's just a counterpoint Certainly yeah, go ahead, Sharon.
I'm not suggesting having that conversation or debate at all.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not suggesting that at all. What I'm suggesting is relating to the people that I know have a different point of view and trying to relate more to their humanity
Mm,
so that maybe we can come together in different ways. You know, and to me, it's a long view. I mean, I don't know that this is going to come about in my lifetime.
mm.
Because I think we're just part of something that's evolving, and I don't know where it's going to go. But however it goes, maybe we'll find ways of supporting each other in spite of the differences. That's my hope. And maybe it's Pollyanna-ish. I don't know.
It's marketing. And here's how. I have some marketing background in a previous life. And one of the things you think about in marketing is, what is the pain point for the person you are marketing to? What pain point can you give a Band-Aid to, or a solution to? What problem are they having that you can solve? Or what vitamin do they need? Where are they looking for strength to not solve a problem, but get stronger? So when we're looking to engage with people with different perspectives, one of the things we can ask is, what is the pain point that the thing they're supporting is relieving for them? Or what is the vitamin that they are getting from this thing they're supporting, this point of view that they're embracing, that motivates them to support? And then from the standpoint of that human connection, that's a starting point of how we can engage on a human level with someone with a different perspective, is by thinking in terms of what was the pain point, or what is the vitamin that they need. So anyway, thanks. So marketing strategy, marketing communications for political discourse. Sharon, thank you. Martine, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I got your link from Yadunath.
Oh, all right, very nice.
So I feel, so I'm French originally. I mean, I'm still French, but I've been living here for over 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, this is a script that we have seen before. Different iteration, different context, same story. Let's numb the masses. Let's repeat the same thing that has no value, no content, no nothing. Just latch on to keywords that will have an impact on the people that are the neediest. And it might or might not run its course. We'll see. The jury's out. But ultimately, that script never ends well and never works out.
Mm-hmm.
It never works out. It has never worked out in history. But along the way, everybody suffers, right? So I think here we are having an intellectual conversation, and the people many people who voted for this administration are educated and all that. And many people who voted for that administration either, gave up, felt not unheard, and go from day to day with a very basic, the price of eggs, the inflation and so forth. And so when you keep, what do you call it in English? Hacking, if you will, or going after the same thing, and you repeat a lie, people will end up believing it. And what happened is the outcome of what we had. It wasn't, and it's not just in the US, but the world holds its breath when we have elections in the US. When I came here 40 years ago, I already felt that the US are a giant with clay feet, like other empires, quote unquote. Water dries out, metaphorically, clearly here, though it's happening geographically too, but anyway, let's not go there. And and then gradually things start to crumble. And when things start to crumble, people have to hold on to something, right? And I think this is what's happening. And it's a hard, for many levels, it's a hard thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, somebody, I don't know, I think it's Casey Dasa, who mentioned that he feels about, you know, people who have children, grandchildren, etc., with this context. My daughter is expecting, and by next Wednesday, if the baby doesn't come on her own, she'll be induced. It's a girl, it's a joy, but I really am worried about the world we are living, you know, she's coming into. So yeah, resistance and all the things that everybody has mentioned is important. I am having a really hard time personally dealing with the other side in terms of, I'm trying to see the humanity in everybody, but dealing in terms of dialogue. If somebody like what you mentioned, Harry, who tells one of us or you have to look at the information the same way, you know, and equipoised, it's very difficult, right?
Yeah.
Because if one has its sources in an area that is backed up by data, backed up by sources, backed up by, you know, real information versus, you know, fake information. So that's a challenge for me, I have to admit. I haven't bumped into, but, you know, in my neighborhood, there is somebody who voted for them, you know. I don't know how they feel right now, because the rest of the neighborhood, I think pretty much, you know, on these two streets, I want to think that they voted in the same direction, so to speak. But, you know, trying to be human and to see the other, you know, myself in the other in a way. And that's I think our challenge, right? To keep at it in a way. To go into your point quickly, I am thinking in that way on the human level. Why are this? I mean, the anger that is driving everything is fascinating, right? So I just wanted to end on that.
So yeah, thank you so much, Martine. You brought up a couple of good points, one of which I was reminded of a piece by David Brooks in the New York Times just a few days ago, wherein he defined stupidity as not asking the question, what happens next? And we know that those who have not learned the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them. And I think it should be pretty clear, based on the lessons of history, what happens next, unless something is done to stop it. And your point about anger, this is where yoga and yoga philosophy and yoga practice comes in, because yoga, and this is my role, you know, when I think, what is my role? What should I be doing? Well, my role is to illuminate the ways in which yoga can offer us a positive vision for the future, values to focus on, or ethical imperatives that come from outside of ourselves that we can use as guidelines for moral decision making, and tools for creating the bandwidth to respond rather than react. A spiritual practice is something that gives us equanimity. It gives us a kind of vision that allows us to see the spiritual nature of everyone we deal with, regardless of the external conditioning that makes them act this way or that way. And it prescribes spiritual action, spiritual engagement with the world that allows us to fight in defense of virtue, in defense of righteousness, in defense of dharma, would be how it would be in Sanskrit. But while at the same time, on a spiritual level, loving our enemies. We can engage, and should engage, in resistance or proactive action from a position of spiritual vision that allows us to be motivated by love rather than by fear or hate or anger. So that's just a quick take on one of the ways I see my role in community with everyone insofar as illuminating what yoga has to say in terms of how we position ourselves internally in order to be able to fight our enemies without hating our enemies. All right, we got some things rolling in from the chat. I am not going to let those get away. Keishi Hunter, please go ahead, then Ashok, and then I will make sure I get to what you're all contributing in the chat.
Yes, going to what Martine was saying is that I think one of the reasons why for many of us we're almost like in shock is because on a relative level, at least in our lifetimes, the government in the United States has been, from our perspective, has been pretty stable. Although there's certainly things that were done overseas by the United States that is another story. But a lot of places around the world, this kind of thing happens all the time. I mean, even worse. And so part of it is kind of like keep it in perspective, like, well, there's so many other places where things are really much worse than here. And throughout history, even places that are, the history, European history and some of that other history, there's always a lot of political turmoil. And, this American experiment's been going on now for 250 years. It's a pretty good run, but hopefully it won't be ending on that note. And as regarding your experience, Hari, I also would know some folks, probably maybe some in the same circles that I've known for decades, and I respect them spiritually and share a lot of spiritual values with. But when it comes to the politics, it's very difficult to engage with them. I have friends, and we're friends, and we can talk about all kinds of things. But when it comes to politics, I won't engage with them because I feel that they won't hear. They're so convinced about their perspective that they're getting, from what I see, as misinformation. When they would present things, and then I would go check reliable sources, and I'd find that no, it's not like that. So it's interesting. So some of my friends, they block their other friends on Facebook or whatever. I don't block them. I just don't follow them. So I don't read all their crazy posts. I hear about them from other people, but I still maintain good friendships with them, and thinking that this is just, for some reason, this is their perspective. And over time, maybe they'll come around. I think in the Gita, it talks about understanding according to the three gunas. You might want to speak on that, about being able to perceive.
That's one of the things that kind of drives me crazy about this very phenomenon that you were referring to, that, a sign of spiritual advancement ought to be that you can distinguish, you have the kind of discernment that allows you to distinguish between religion and irreligion, and information that is true and information that is not true. And why doesn't that happen?
Right.
All right, thank you very much. Those verses are in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna speaks about how you can recognize the three qualities of material nature: illumination, passion, and darkness, by their symptoms. And when you experience people through the lens of these three qualities of material nature, it actually is an aid to what I call compassionate detachment, understanding the difference between the person and the way in which that person is affected by their particular relationship with these qualities of material nature. All right, Keishi Hunter, thank you. Ashok, go ahead, and then I'm going to get to the chat.
So, to the question, what we are doing at a personal level, and I'm bringing this in from my workplace experience, where there's a lot of turmoil around what's going on. there's a lot of anger and a lot of expression of anger. The advice and to them, to my coworkers as well as to myself, this is the time to practice how to be equipoised. We all read it. We all go through. This is the time when we are tested. Can we really have faith and stay equipoised in these trying circumstances? This is the approach I'm taking. I don't know whether that's right approach or wrong approach. And why I'm taking this approach is because if I'm looking at the actions are driven by a lot of material. Where is the money? How do we go and capture that money? If we look at shutting down of the big government departments, the focus is where are the big money pots? Will that last? In my mind, it's more of trying an attempt to take control of those money pots. It's highly focused on materialistic rather than fixing anything for society. And we all know if the focus is on materialistic things, it may have a run, a year, 2 year, maybe 4 years, the entire term. We will feel traumatized, but should we give them the reaction they want to see? And if we don't give the reaction, we are doing our bit of not adding up to their joy, and hence make them feel stupid, if that's a word I can use. That's how I'm approaching it. Another lens which I have not used, but listening to everyone came to my mind is the principle of yamas and niyamas. And if we use that lens and filter their actions through that, we will very quickly see how, say, Elon Musk is benefiting from all the government grants, which we all need to highlight. Hey, it's not everyone else. You're also getting benefited. Talk more about it. He did a big show yesterday, and conveniently, that transparency thing which he's talking about, we should ask that transparency jointly together. That's few things which are going in my mind.
Ashok, thank you very much. Yes, the practices of yoga are meant to empower us with equanimity. We are advised to cultivate a consciousness where we are not elated when there is a source of happiness or depressed when there is a source of unhappiness. And contentment is one of the niyamas, which we are advised to cultivate as part of our personal self-care. Contentment in such times is not an easy thing to have or to develop, because contentment can sometimes be mistaken for complacency. And they're two different things. So what you are speaking about insofar as developing inner balance, equanimity, that sort of thing, those are things we can get from a regular yoga practice, regular meditation practice, from spiritual community. And those things are meant to be empowering because our path to transcendence goes through the world, not around it or not away from it. This is one of the messages I certainly get from the Bhagavad Gita, is that we are not encouraged to say, oh, forget about it and run off to the forest just to do our own, find our own tranquility. But rather, we are called to engage with the world from an empowered spiritual position in order to do the right thing just because it's the right thing to do without attachment to the results. And if we go about it with that mood, then we can both do our best to make whatever difference we can, and at the same time find our own inner peace. So thank you very much. I want to get quickly, we only have a few minutes left, so I want to just get quickly to the chat. There is a plan for a national boycott on February 28th. There's a website, Boycott USA or General Strike, generalstrikeus.com. And you can get involved with the general strike plan for February 28th right there. And there's an interesting calculation of how many people historically does it take to go on a general strike in any country? What's the percentage you need in order for it to actually work? Because history says that if the strike is big enough, it actually works. So it's kind of an interesting idea just right there. From Michelle, Power vs. Force for anyone interested in the book. Another source from Jamie, Calm News with Jessica Yellen. She is great at providing news in a way that does not trigger your nervous system. That can be very helpful because all our nervous systems are pretty shot right now. From Michelle, anger is a tool used to galvanize those who would otherwise be passive in the situation to draw them to their cause. The powers that be want to keep us separate and point the anger towards one another. So yeah, divide and conquer, standard strategy. So yes, we do not want to be busy fighting each other, pointing fingers about who's to blame for this, that, or the other thing. Now is not the time for that. Isn't it interesting how we are all encouraged to never talk about politics? Yeah, there's something I came across recently called the thought ending cliche. That is any political group or cult or something like that, people in power always have some easy, snappy thing to say that basically shuts down questioning or thinking. And it was a fascinating concept that you can look for. So if someone tells you something that feels like it's just meant to end any possibility or further discussion or further questioning, odds are you've come up against one of these thought-preventing cliches. Our social media news outlets tell us how to think, but they don't teach us how to think. That gets us all riled up. Yeah, so we should think this is terrible, or this is great, or whichever news media outlet you're in. Yeah, don't fall for it. That's one of the things I try to remind myself is just like, don't fall for the thought concluding stuff like we shouldn't talk about politics or something like that. Okay. We are at time. Any last comments about what our roles might be and how we might go about finding our particular role in this current situation? We talked about who we've been hearing from, how we engage with others with different points of view, personal actions that we can take, connecting with community on a very, very local level, that sort of thing. Any last comments on what we have spoken about? Michelle, go ahead.
This is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
We're going to need to pace ourselves and try to stay as grounded as we can and take each day at a time. And like you said, little by little, we can't expect ourselves to do everything, but we have to do something. And Hari, I just want to say I appreciate you for, being courageous and, calling people together as opposed to, just ignoring all of it or pretending it doesn't exist, because there's a lot of folks out there who are doing that. So I appreciate you as always, Hari. Thank you.
Michelle, thank you very much. I appreciate your very valuable contributions to this conversation. All right. Quickly in the chat, if you live in Virginia or New Jersey, they have big elections this year. You can volunteer. A lot of cities have municipal races and elections this year, and those local offices really do matter. So find out who's running for what in your local area and support someone who is going to reflect your values, whether it's your local ward representative in your neighborhood or your board of elections or your school board. Any of these, all these little elections really do count. So I encourage you all to please find out what's going on in your backyard and participate. All right. Thank you all very, very much for your participation in this conversation. I'm very, very grateful to all of you taking the time to be here, and I look forward to hearing from you. If you have anything you want to share with me outside of this conversation, you all know where to find me, and I look forward to seeing you again for our next community conversation. Have a wonderful rest of your day.